I think again, and it's another thing that I've spoken about a few times, and something that you've mentioned. Everybody's journey is going to be completely different. Everybody's story is going to be completely different. It doesn't really matter. What I'm trying to champion is the things that you're exposed to when you're young. If you are inclined to pay attention, you're already inclined to pay attention. Those things don't become like apparent to you until you have what I call like 2020, which is just hindsight. You look back and you're like, oh wow, that thing really affected me. So I say like to all of you guys, like if you have a moment, really think about like all the things that you've gone through, experiences, conversations, places you've been, and those things are actually what are feeding you, because I now notice that, so which I think is insane. But.
Yeah, there's a book, it's a graphic novel by a woman named Jessica Abel, and it's called, how am I forgetting right now? It's about radio. Right. And there's an interview with the people who are behind This American Life, and basically, it's kind of like the what's really shaped the world of podcasting, like that example. But you're a I think his name's Ira Glass. Ira Glass, yeah. So one of the things he said was so interesting was like, follow your taste, and he gives this example of somebody who was really curious about people who had houses that didn't reflect their employment. So they had these really great houses and huge houses that seemed like you should be like an executive or something like that, and you really like people living check to check were having those houses. And he was like, how is that possible? So in 2006 he starts to go down this rabbit hole. Well, he's considered a genius for seeing the mortgage bubble before it happened, but it wasn't really him seeing the mortgage bubble before it happened. It was just him being aware of his taste and following his taste. And I think
and something I also want to add to that, when it comes to, it's an aside, but I think it's important. When it comes to decision making, and we'll get into the career path and all of that kind of like useful information, but know something that I learned really quickly. When it comes to decision making, please, I champion this all the time, don't make decisions out of fear based on the things that you think may happen or think may not happen. And I say that just because, like, growing up, you may, come from nothing, or you may come from everything. When you're making decisions, don't think that like the leap forward is going to be that much scarier than it really is, because it isn't. And I say don't make decisions out of fear, meaning like if you don't have $10 to your name, don't think that like, oh, I can't pick up a camera and like go pursue this as a career option because I don't have any money. It'll somehow just work out. I mean, still like find a job, but at the same time, like just be aware.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I want to ask you about this photograph, but I think there was something that a friend. Oh, I'll let you see right here on the phone.
There you go. Oh, right. Right.
So, but to that point about fear, a friend of mine was actually saying something recently that like that's actually a really good indicator that you should do something like that. If it's something that you want to do and you're also afraid of it, it's like that's the perfect challenge. I mean, do it. It means you should. That's like a yes.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about this photo of Pierre Trudeau.
So this photo, I'll save you guys all like the really long-winded version of it, but the reason why my family came to Canada is because of the Trudeau family, and it was just an important like symbolic moment in my family where my aunt had done all these things to kind of like bring her family from Jamaica. And long and short of it is, I always knew Trudeau was like this huge important factor in our lives, and I just didn't really know like exactly why. I didn't really get it. But in high school, and again, this goes back to like learning what you want out of life and just kind of like just going for it. I was one of the few kids who actually used the darkroom in high school. I was one of those like.
Yeah, you said you took like photography every
year.
Yeah,
I took high school.
I wish I did that.
Well, I was lucky. I had a really dope darkroom and like one teacher who actually believed in photography. And so I used it every single year. I like enrolled in the photography class, and obviously every year it got smaller and smaller and smaller. All of that to say was, this was erected behind my high school, and as soon as I saw it, and that like aha moment, that kind of like light bulb that went off, if you look at the photo, it kind of looks like a conventional portrait in the angle that it's taken. And this thing is probably about 10 feet off the ground. Like it stands about 12 feet in height in general. So I had to like climb, and I was hanging off of his arm, like his other arm, and like.
I wish there was a photo of that too.
We didn't have camera phones back then, so thank God, because probably a lawsuit would have come up. But anyways, I was hanging off of it with my old film camera, and I just shot this photo of Trudeau in a way that like I wanted to make him seem like he was real, even though it was this thing made out of bronze. And the way that it came out, and the reason why we're even going to talk about this photo is because of the next slide. I didn't realize at the time that this angle and this way of shooting still to this day is something that I actually use. And I didn't know. Like, this is how I shoot today. Like, when I'm shooting a portrait, my like 3/4 body layout is still very similar to this.
So how old were you exactly when the Pierre Trudeau one was taken?
So this was taken...
Or is it grade 9, 10?
Grade 10, so I don't know how old I was.
15, yeah.
Yeah.
And then...
and I'm 29 now for reference, by the way.
So, and then this one now we're looking at was taken when?
And this was taken last year. Well, no, a year and a half ago. So if you notice, and again, this is going back to like the trends of things that are just, they just so happen to be the thing that you do, and you notice stylistically things that just don't change, that are like integral to who you are as a person. This is very similar in the same composition that I shot when I was 15. It may not be the exact same thing, and I have other photos that may be a better example, but I wanted to show you something that looked very similar because this is a commercial photograph versus something that I was hanging off of a bronze thing. Thankfully, I wasn't hanging off of anything, but...
So you weren't hanging off of his arm when you shot that?
Definitely not. Okay. Kind of suspect, but a little weird. You probably would have looked at me
Do
like,
what you gotta do to get the photo.
A
So
monkey.
we won't spend too much time on kind of the whole life story, but I think there's an interesting element of you're really intense into photography during high school. You have this eye that your dad recognized from early on in your photographs, and then you put down the camera. If you can talk a little bit about like why you put down the camera and then why you picked it back up.
So the reason I said, like, when I was asked, like, when I started photography, so I technically picked up a camera at 10, but what happened was, after, like, literally right after high school, so when I graduated in grade 12 and I ended up going to U of T, don't ask me why exactly, but, and I still don't really know now, not that it matters, but I put down the camera for, I'd say a good 5 to 6 years. And for whatever reason, I just didn't know, but it just didn't interest me anymore. And looking back on it, it was a really good like rest for my mind and a really good period in which like I could just not really think about like communicating through photography, but rather like I was in university and I was in pre-law, so I was busy like writing essays and figuring out like what I wanted to do with my life. And when I refer back to stuff like this, it's just funny that even with that huge gap, nothing changed. Like it just still stayed in my skin, I guess, in a way. So,
well, and I think a lot of people have their own version of that story of like seeing at some point this interest in photography, and maybe it's because you're pursuing another career path, or maybe you just think it's not viable, or maybe you just...
I wanted to be a lawyer, so I didn't think photography had anything to do with that, to be honest with you.
And then you got into fashion.
Yeah, so I started in the retail industry, and I did my stint at Ralph Lauren. Then I got like really heavily into like Italian tailoring, which is very important to my life because it's still like part of like what I do now. And because I developed this like really keen interest in understanding like fit, structure, construction, then I was a buyer for a while for TJX Global, and I was like doing the whole traveling bit, like from here to Italy to, and again, I say this not to boast, but just so you understand like a bit of my background. Spending that time not touching a camera, but like doing the traveling, going away and like learning about the industry that I was so vested in and realizing that I didn't want to become a lawyer. That's when I picked up the camera again, and that's what like was my segue into what I do now, literally because I was in retail, and because I was understanding like clothing itself and not just like photography.
So I've just thrown up the H&M photo.
Oh yeah, that was funny. So
tell us this story, and because I think this is really like that kind of moment where...
Yeah, this was my big like wow moment. So not a great photo, but I took this with was it? What did I have? I think this was like my first digital camera ever. I think it was like a little Canon Rebel, whatever that had come out that year. This was like when the Rebels had first come out.
Version 1.
Yeah, literally like phase 1 version. Like it was just horrible. But and so I'm in H&M and I don't know why I had my camera on me. I think I had just picked it up again and I was just like, screwing around with it. And this kid here, don't know his name to this day, somehow like in H&M, just like we were in the women's section and his mom was next to him and like he wrapped himself up in this little fur jacket thing. And I don't know what came over me, but I instinctively did this and like picked up my camera to take the photo. And then I was like, oh, wait. So I asked his mom, I said, hey, do you mind if I take a photo of your son? Not for any other reason than I just thought it was a cool photo. Now, the cool part about digital, right? So you take the photo and you look down. So I looked down and I was like, holy shit, this looks really cool. And I fell in love with what I was doing again. And it may not be like this big epic photo to anybody else, but for me, I looked down and I was like, this is what, at least it gave me an inkling. It's like, this is what I should be doing. It was like this great intersection between fashion, photography, real life, portraiture, and like a bit of photojournalism. Not that I was thinking of all of these things, but that was my aha moment.
But you still didn't think a career in photography was...
Hell no. No, not at all.
But it
was like, yeah.
You wanted to pursue something. So can you explain that, where you still don't believe in a career.
It was about the art.
But
and I use the word art like really loosely, but it was really about like, here's the best way for me to explain it was, it just made me feel something. And that is a point that I use now. So like when we're going to be talking about some more of my work, I don't, like for the longest time, I know it also sounds stupid now, but I would say like I wasn't a photographer, but I was taking like really beautiful photos. And the reason I was so like gung-ho about it was because I wanted to, no matter what I was doing, any photo I took, I wanted the viewer to feel like they wanted to be there or be a part of the image itself. And that has been my driving force. And it started with this photo.
Yeah, that image makes me want to be in H&M that day.
Yeah, I mean, if it was done better, like with proper lighting and like a different setup, I think it could have been like a little ad or something. But
though that was like
Shout out to
a couple
H&M.
of things for H&M though. Maybe like we could say Zara now or something.
Yeah,
instead.
exactly. Yeah.
So there's another question I have, but before we jump back into photos, but you said something like about the difference between someone who takes beautiful pictures and a photographer. You're like, I was taking beautiful pictures, but I wasn't a photographer. What is the difference?
Okay, so I've been chewed out for this. So I
there is a Q&A, so you might get chewed out again.
Hey man, I'm here. I'm not wearing a bulletproof vest, but it's all good. There was a moment in my life where this wasn't a career option for me, but I would literally go out and sit, and I had a website and everything. Like, remember Tumblr, guys? Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is back in the day.
There's still Tumblr.
Really? Yeah. I use Pinterest still. I'm kidding. But yeah, I had a Tumblr. It was called My Eyes, Your Screen, and it was like this whole endeavor for me to have this conversation with people that I guess looked at my work to feel like it was my eyes and like your screen, so like you were interacting with the photo. And I didn't call myself a photographer because I wasn't technically trained. Yes, I had been shooting in high school and I had like all of this technical experience in film development and all of these things, but it just wasn't like, and I say photographer because photographer for me was like a label that meant that this was something that I was going to do as like a life choice and like make money doing it. So at the time I was like, no, this is just art. Like I just want to do it. And it kind of just didn't turn out to be that I wasn't a photographer. I really was a photographer, and I realized that. And then I got chewed out for it by one of my good friends, and he's like, dude, you need to shut up with this. Like, you're being an idiot. Because I was already at New York Fashion Week, I was at Paris Fashion Week, and I was still saying I wasn't a photographer. But I was.
So, I mean, I think that kind of insecurity, that kind of questioning is something almost all of us can relate to, like that. It's the ability to say, I am an artist. You're like, a conversation we had last time, actually Caden Sweppen, who's sitting right where I am now, earlier this week, he's like, it's a very kind of like almost pretentious thing to say, right? Like,
That's exactly what it was. I didn't want to seem like a douchebag because I was like, I'm not really a photographer.
but at the same time, you realized you were.
Yeah, and by not saying I was.
So in like adding the hindsight to it, I mean, for other people to kind of break out of that own struggle that they have of like, oh well, I'm not technically trained, and so I'm not a photographer. Like I look at that, sports analogies all the time. Like you might not have gone through all of the steps, but if you make it to the league, you're in the league. Like you're getting, you know what I mean? Like doesn't matter how.
But I also think it's important to not get caught up in labels. Whereas today, like we can. This is an entirely different conversation, but the term creative director gets thrown around a lot, right? Like I'm a this, I'm a that, and we're in a generation now where, and I can say this because now I work with real companies. I have real contracts, and so the conversation is not about like, oh, like what do you do? It's what's the work that you produce. Now, when you use a label, today I think it's too commonplace, and you don't really need it, to be honest with you. Like just what I'm trying to say is just let the work speak for itself. Like you don't need to be a creative director on your Instagram profile to like glean anything. It doesn't.
That said, I mean, let me rephrase the question. So for you to look at somebody else's work and say, "Oh, that person is a photographer," what are you looking for? For as someone who is pretty established.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not as important anymore in the label, and I'm saying let your work do the talking for you, rather than like this is what I do. Here's my business card, phone number, email, like wagwan, like this is what I do. No. Let the work speak for itself, and I think that resonates with people because, again, like what I do is I'm still trying to create an emotional connection between the viewer and me through a photo, and that's what resonates, not the title. So, to really answer your question, when I look at somebody's work, if it inspires me, again, it's taste, right? Like everybody gets inspired by different things. Half of you may not even like the photos I take, but I do what I do because I love what I do, and like it's not a matter of opinion; it's subjective. But if you are trying to do something and you are effectively doing that thing, then by all means, that's you. So
I like that. Some clarity to that. So now we're gonna go to this. How did you get from that moment in the women's section, taking a picture of someone else's child,
to publishing my own magazine?
Yes.
So, little bit of a background. So I still run and operate a company called A&H Group, which stands for Art and Hustle Group. And this was like kind of a pipe dream that myself and my business partner at the time, Corey, who like it's based in Miami. We had this idea that you could make this crazy intersection between art and like this need to hustle to like make money, to like make a living out of it. Because the whole term starving artist just never resonated with us. Like my business partner was the type of kid who used to sell Snickers to like kids in elementary school when he was there. Like he just never gave up. And so
it's like pre-peanut allergies. So
pretty much, exactly. Yeah, wouldn't want a lawsuit or kill anybody. But yeah, like we kind of we coded ourselves as hustlers. Like, and I mean that in the term of like, I still to this day say that like, yo, I will hustle to the last dime to do what I do. Like, I don't care.
That's one thing I hear you say a lot is like, I may not be better than you, but I'll outwork you.
I will outwork the shit out of anybody. Trust me. Like and I say that because I have the fuel to do it and I've been broke. Like I'm telling you right now, like, and I can openly say this because this is a platform for reality. Like my company itself has gone bankrupt twice, but I'm still here having this conversation with y'all. And I'm saying that to you because like, yo, there is something, if you really want to do it, like just figure it out. It will happen. That's how that happened. So we had this idea. We were an online magazine, and we were talking about art, menswear. We were like the very few Black people in Italy during it's called Pitti Uomo, which is like a men's trade show. It was like the biggest thing for like men's fashion at the time. We were the only ones there. I paid for that ticket. Like I was the one who said, okay, like we're gonna go do this. I went to go photograph it, and I put my soul into it. So we said, okay, how do we turn this into something tangible? And I'm not plugging my Instagram or anything, but it's called Savior of Print. And because I believe in like that, if like I have ink residue on my fingers by the end of it, like that's what I love. I love seeing things in print. So we did this. I can't tell you how many people said we weren't going to be able to do this, and I I went into debt for like a good year, publishing a magazine, but we figured it out. We like none of us had InDesign experience. Like none of us knew how to lay out a magazine. We just did it, and you can scroll through some of the photos. I put Marcus Troy on the cover. This was his first. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, but I was the first one to put him on a magazine cover because, and this is another conversation, but again, we were a group of black men who believed in doing something different and doing something with taste and doing something in our style. So we just put it together, and it was called Risk Takers, and pretty poignant now because we had risked all of what we had, working crazy jobs, doing whatever it is that we could to produce this, and we sold out in like a month, 2,000 copies, and that's not on some like bragging shit. It was just like, yo, I wanted to do something, don't know how we did it. This is what, 3.5 years, almost 4 years now that we did this. And everybody, and a lot of the pictures that you're seeing were actually sent to us by like readers. And we touched people. And I'm sorry I don't have a copy of it here because I'm in the wrong city.
Because they sold out?
No, I have 5 copies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for myself. I mean, it's something that I wanted to do. But everybody that bought a magazine, for the most part, came back to us, and the response, that is what really did it for me. We didn't make any money off of this. Yeah, we sold out, but we barely broke even. When we put this together and calling it Risk Takers, it was pretty ballsy because when you read it, and there's so much in there that it would take us another hour to talk about, but there were quotes in there, like there was a piece called I believe in a bigger picture. I believe in seeing things a little bit, wider and taking in a bigger story than just like the details of something, which are still beautiful, but I just don't care.
So that era was really about pulling out the knowledge you had from a particular industry, and bringing those details to life.
Exactly, and that's what sold, by the way. Like that's what people really got to know me for, and all the brands were like, "Wow, like we haven't seen anybody shoot like this before."
Yeah, like if I was selling jackets and that pocket was a unique thing, I would want that
exactly.
Shot tells you the story.
Oh man, these are bringing back memories.
What's the memory of this movie?
Oh, that's new.
Hold on, let's go back.
I think some slides probably
that's good. So this is the end of we're going to the end of it. So what memories does this bring back?
So this was Pitiumo. So this is the trade show I was talking about in Florence. So this was in like scalding hot June in Florence. Beautiful, absolutely like phenomenal experience. But so this was for Suit Supply. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, but I kind of just went, and this was, I think, the second time I had gone to Florence. Again, like a trip that I took with my own money, like kind of just figured it out. And they needed photographs of like the suits in action. So I set it upon myself to speak with the group. So, I mean, these guys are like, the guy in the middle, his name is Lino Laluzzi. He's kind of like the godfather of Italian tailoring. And I wanted to capture these men in their element. And so none of these moments are staged. They were just very natural. And that was kind of like the only other few people that were doing it at the time were like Tommy Ton, but he was shooting like more women's fashion. Or like Scott Schumann was doing what we all know today. I was one of the few other photographers at Pitumo being able to photograph moments like this because I built up relationships with these people, knowing them from like work. And so that was kind of crazy for me to look back and be like, wow, that took a couple like strong years of me talking to these guys and like going to the mills, going to the factories, going to the showroom for me to even be allowed to like be in that little inner circle. So
it's that investment of time in the industry to build the trust to get that access with the photo. And then there's another element I'm hearing in that, which is like knowing where you fit in that niche.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, finding out what really is important to you.
Well, and who's doing what, and not trying to do what someone else is doing.
Exactly,
well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to pick up a camera now, and like, I mean, sorry, not easy, but it's more commonplace to pick up a camera now and make your work look like a lot of other people's work, just because, I mean, that's just how things are now. It's just access. But back then, and something that I use now is just learning to take the time to get to know the people that you're photographing. Like, I mean, it seems pretty like duh, but I didn't even realize that until I started taking the photos. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, there's a reason why I can just step up in here and like shoot your face this way, because I knew them and it wasn't awkward for them.
Yeah, I've heard that. There was a interview I was listening to that New Currency magazine did. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's known for doing these like really home video style shoots of DJs and like those massive DJs like what's that group, man? It's like the biggest EDM group in the world. Help me out. You guys know? No one listens to EDM.
I listen to reggae. I'm sorry.
No, I don't know. Anyhow, the name, it's like right there on my tip.
Yeah, all to say that you have to really take the time
but yeah,
to like, know your subject.
That's his whole thing. It was like he was really immersed in DJ culture, and a lot of these people let him get so close and be there like right beside him because they have that trust, they have that relationship, but they also like trusted how he was approaching it too.
Yeah, access is real, people. Like if I'm gonna give you a nugget out of like what we're talking about, and again to like veer right back to the topic, my style is intimacy. I'm very emotional when I'm shooting, and that is because it's real. It's not faked. It's not even so. For example, like when I walk on a set now in a commercial shoot, the person that I'm shooting, professional model, I'll still take them aside for like a good 5 to 10 minutes and have like a conversation about not photography, not what we're doing, but like, yo, like, what do you do? What's your name? Like, what are your interests? And I find that laughter, I'm sure you guys hear this now, like I'm kind of sarcastic, but I'll just crack jokes the whole time. And it's that light feeling that is important when you're shooting somebody, because it's awkward. I don't like being photographed. Like, it's just weird to me, but I use those same tools now where, you know, even talking to you, we're just gonna have a conversation.
Okay.
So
let's get into your style now.
Yeah. So, oh, right. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I sent these two. So this was,
and I guess my question really is like, how would you describe your style? So you have this early, like, you know, Trudeau statue moment that really like was your eye of getting in close and getting those details. You have this H&M moment where it's like, it's this really kind of spontaneous, but also like recognition, like this is something special. You move into an industry that you get to know.
So something you asked me, and again, we obviously prepared for this a little bit, so we talked. You had asked me like, what was my aha moment? So to kind of pull back in stuff that we just talked about, that feeling that I got when I shot that kid in H&M, I still feel that now. Like when I'm on set, okay, outside of me getting to know the person I'm photographing, outside of like the technical aspect of lighting and all of this stuff, I'm literally the guy on set who's like, yo, wait, holy shit, don't move. And like, I just nerd out. And this photo came from that. So a little bit of a background on this. So this was a commercial shoot for Plaza Homo, which is, I got a cover feature from them this past year. They're just an international like men's magazine, and they're really well to do. They'd be on par with like Monocle or something like that, but a little more like niche. Anyway, so this shoot, which is unreleased right now, the guy that I'm shooting, his name is Cassius Corrigan. He's the lead actor and director of a film called Huracan, which is this really cool film about like multiple personality disorder. The reason I'm telling you all this is because that character you're seeing in this photo, that gaze that he's giving you is the character Huracan. So Huracan is this like deadly killer who is completely just driven by madness. And so we're on set and we're in KO Zone, which is the MMA gym in Miami, and I literally looked up at Cassius, and again, so I've taken a few months to get to know him, and I said to Cassius, I was like, yo, give me that look, you know, the one in the movie, and I gave him like, I don't know, like 10-15 seconds, looked away, looked back at me, and he scared the shit out of all of us.
Wow.
Like the chill in the room, it may not seem as scary and daunting in this photograph, but like just the vibe in the room is pretty effectively like coming out in this.
Well, I guess what we don't have here is
what
he
image
looks
before,
like in his relaxed life.
Exactly,
right?
And the image before and the image after. Like that's what you're not seeing. But this is how I got to that point of like this crazed maniac who's gonna like rip your head off, and that's how I felt in the camera.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So just going back on it, because I think we're gonna go right now through a number of your photos, currently in your style. But if you can describe your style both in terms of the technical side of it,
Okay. Yeah.
and also you talked a lot about. That's all. I don't forget it. We'll go back to it. Yeah. So there's that technical element of it,
Right.
but there's also this desire to catch kind of off the cuff moments.
Right.
So if you can just talk about those, that approach you have, I'm gonna flip through a few of these so people can see what you mean.
So technically speaking, my style is very, as I said before, like intimate. It's emotional. No, that's not like really like a question on like what equipment I use or anything like that.
But it's warm, right? We talked about
yeah,
that kind of like cinematic European.
So the point I'm getting to now is like my use of lighting. I don't use strobes a lot. Like I don't use strobe lighting. All of this is like constant light, and it's set up in a very cinematic way. Like it's actual cinema lighting, like bracketed a certain way to make it look very extreme. Because my influences now are from cinema, and so when I'm photographing, like even a photo like that, so that I shot in Rome, I used like a big, massive gold bounce. And warmth to me is more than just the tone and the temperature of the image. It's when I look at it, it's not like the warm fuzzy feeling, but it's that, oh wow, like this feels buttery but sharp and intimate, yet I'm not really there. And it's like a weird kind of mix between all these things to make sure that my image looks like it's real. Even if I've made it up, like that photo, the story behind that is another thing. So he's an actual African migrant from Guinea, and that was shot for Ikiri Jones, which is one of the main outfitters for Black Panther. So this was like an offshoot of the Black Panther movie. And we shot this in Rome, and the setting was like very strange and very cold. It was like it had just snowed for the first time in like 50 years or something.
It does not look like it was snowing.
It had just snowed the day before, yeah.
Wow.
So warmth in that, like I still wanted to make sure that those feelings of like the film, like the Black Panther movie, were coming out in the photo. And that's just use of like understanding light and understanding not just the technical elements of it, but like the artistic elements of it, and like flipping through a lot of books, watching a lot of like really good film. And that's how I've just developed like my style. And there was a second part to that question.
Which is the moments as well.
Right.
So these kind of off the cuff moments that you really
this one in particular, and even like, not to take away your thunder, but like this right here, these weren't the actual shots. Like I gave him some direction, and then like in between moments, I was photographing this stuff. Because again, like even though it's something that's set up, I'm still trying to tell a story that's real and tangible and like still resonates with me emotionally. So off the cuff for me is like all those in between moments are just as important as the stage ones, like that are completely like for him or for the for the model to understand that he needs to be in this pose. But like I love all those other moments that I find really important.
This one,
that was definitely staged, but
yeah, and that's, I think this is very much in line with what we're talking about here, right? Like it is staged because tables never have that kind of perfection, but it doesn't feel that. It feels warmth. It feels like you want to be sitting there. It feels like
having a cup of coffee in the morning.
This is what that breakfast would look like, or whatever meal of the day.
In my fantasy land, yes.
Yeah, and in your memory, right?
Exactly. So when Essential Ohm asked us to, this was for the magazine, they had asked us to capture Art Basel in Miami as kind of like what you do outside of Art Basel. And it was a whole narrative about like really living your best life in Miami. And, all of this was based on like a dream, like this dream life that I had. And the creative director who I work with a lot, Chris Cortez, we envisioned like this fairy tale life on yachts, like, eating caviar and like having Moroccan coffee that actually wasn't hot, but looked really nice. And yeah, that's again, just elemental things that came to bear, but I just love the way that it came out because of the warmth.
Okay, so sorry, there's a caviar there.
Yeah, and then that last one, I'm gonna go back to that. So my poor friend who ended up being the model for this. We got her to. So this was actually filmed as well. They did a mini a short film for it. She was jumping off the front of this yacht at sunset in Miami, like right outside of the basically the city limits, and I was on a dinghy and like not too far away, and I shot this with an 85. And again, it was that moment where I just looked up and I was like, "Holy shit!
Mm-hmm.
Don't move! Like, I need to take the photo." And it came out pretty cool. I mean, I loved it, and it was very little retouching too, which I thought was cool.
So I'm trying to go back to here.
So that's my friend Rena. So again, that was an off the cuff moment. She was in the water, and a couple technical things too. So the warmth in my photos actually came about from understanding like not only how light worked, but so this was shot with an 85 1.2 with an ND filter, which is like the best tool I've ever invested in. The ND filter is like the best thing ever. And we used a gold bounce on this too. But like that, like had I taken this photo maybe 2 years ago, it probably would have looked completely different because I didn't understand. Like,
So what would it look like? What would be the difference?
probably like just her face, like a portrait. Like it wouldn't have been. I wouldn't have understood. Like I wanted the water to ripple behind her. Like this isn't a pool, and you know, just like that off pose that she had. Like I would have been more focused on just her face, but I loved everything about this photo. Like the way that her back was slightly, you know, kind of curved, and like she had just turned because she was talking to somebody behind me. And she actually didn't know like I had taken the photo, and I didn't tell her to stop doing what she was doing. This was like in between like a word. And yeah, it sounds a lot like luck, and it is, but it's calculated luck. It's doing this for so long to understand like that's what I wanted, and that's how I got the photo.
Yeah, and I love how you said that, because I think that one, you're technically setting up the space to have that kind of warmth.
Exactly.
That is part of your...
And the opportunity. I'm setting myself up for the opportunity to capture the thing that I want to capture because I'm understanding what's going on in the moment.
And the consistent thread is that, oh, they didn't know I was taking this, or this was not the intended shot.
Exactly. It wasn't as scary.
How often is it that a client picks up or chooses the images that were caught in those off moments for you?
I'm very lucky that, and this is something we also wanted to touch on. So doing work for people that I want to do work for, and that's not like some cocky thing, like, oh, I don't want to work with you because you're not cool, or like the budget isn't this. No, I mean to say like the integrity of the people that I work with, the companies that I shoot for, they have a story, or there's just something about them that I love, but they also respect what I do enough to like let me do all my picks, all my edits, and if there's any retouching, like I'll do it because I have so much creative ownership over my work that I find very important. Where a lot of times, like as a photographer, like we'll just take photos and just hand off raws or something. That's crazy. I would never do that. But so
why would you never do that? Because not everybody has that mindset.
Okay, so to me that's tantamount to like handing over my blood, like unedited photos, like because where's the control after that point? At that point, I'm just a camera operator. Why'd you hire me? Because I know how to like compose something? No, and I'm not just talking about like edits, like, oh, we throw in a visco filter and like, okay, like, you know, skin retouching. I'm talking about the selects and the narrative that comes with the thing. So all of my clients, whether it be, just to give you an example, so like Bentley Motors or Louis Trey or, you know, Essential Home, they all understand that I'm not just taking photos, I'm doing a narrative, like I'm putting a storyboard together for them, and which goes into something very important that we're going to go into at the last point, which is mood boarding, right, and how I've developed that over the years, which is very interesting to me at least. But yeah, like, and negotiating that with a client is something that's also very important. Like,
how do you negotiate that? What's your approach to that?
It starts from the initial conversation of like, why did you reach out to me? Or like when a client, you know, contacts me, it's like, well, I don't get people asking me to shoot weddings. And if I did, I would ask them, why are you asking me to shoot a wedding? Like, is there something about my style that you like, that you love, that resonates with you? And that's also a very important question that needs to be asked a lot of the time as a photographer. Like when a client approaches you, or even when you approach a client, it's pretty much like an interview. You're developing a relationship with these people. Like understand what their needs are and understand like your ability to effectively deliver on those things. And yes, your style should be applicable to like a myriad of things, and it should be able to like kind of morph and change and do whatever you need to do. But at the end of the day, like your core of who you are, and as a photographer, like your style is what it is. As this whole conversation is, I hope you're getting that from my picture from when I was 15. I have a style. That's what I like to do, and that's what I say. Like if a client doesn't resonate with that, then unfortunately.
So it's that question of, okay, why is it that you want to work with me? Or if you're approaching them, still trying to bring that why into the conversation.
Yeah, and why in
why this is why you would work
exactly
with me. This is
in
what
every
I offer.
respect. Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about what you do and what has worked and what your kind of niche is. But can you talk a little bit about how did you figure out what you don't want to do? Like you said, you don't want to shoot weddings. You're not the person for that, or like. And I know you were saying something along the lines of like, just a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, I
going
mean,
wrong.
So I realized I didn't want to shoot like corporate photography, and that like I didn't want to do corporate headshots because I did it once and I didn't get paid, and they hated the photos, and I felt like the biggest idiot ever. And it was through failure that I realized what it is that I didn't want to do. So I'm not going to like bore you guys with the story, but essentially I did this 2-day long shoot that that turned into a reshoot, which wasn't my fault. And they just at the end of it didn't even want the photos. And by the way, it was a law firm, so it wasn't like I could take them to court because
you lose even if you're right.
I was losing walking into the court. And the budget wasn't even that big, but it was something that I learned, and I was like, okay, guess this is not ever happening again because I don't want to deal with. Again, like you can't like know who you're going to deal with, but I'm not going to go shoot corporate headshots. I know somebody who can go do that better than I can, and I'll openly admit that. Like that, I'm not the guy for that. And it's because I tried a lot of different things. In the same way that my career, I tried a lot of different things, and I wasn't the best at it, and I wasn't very good at it. So I figured out what my niche was, and I tried to stick in that lane, but within that, like develop my style and kind of like open up a little bit, and not just pigeonhole myself to one thing, but understand what my style does for the prospective client. So
I think that's really important to take in, is that like trying those things.
Yeah.
Seeing what works for you, what doesn't, where you can make your best offering, and then learning from those as well. Like
failure to me is the best thing. Like, and we had talked about this on the phone. I said, there's 2 types of failure for me. There's like failing for the sake of failing, and okay, you screwed up, and then there's like good failure, and the good failure are the things that you screw up on and you walk away with more than you walked in with. Like really effing up on something and then understanding why and like not doing it again the next time and learning how not to do it the next time, or like safeguarding yourself against something like that is so important, not just as a life lesson, but like in what we do.
There was something you said to me about the same reason why someone would work with you is the same reason why somebody would not want to work with you.
Right. So there's this director, film director. His name isn't any of importance to anybody, but he said something pretty poignant to a friend of mine who kind of like washed it down to me. He said that when you know what you want to do and you are like very strong-headed and like almost concentrated on that thing, you walk into a room with an energy, like, or you'll pick up a phone with a certain energy when you're dealing with a client. And for the same amount of energy that I bring into something, because I want to be a narrator, I want to tell stories. Again, I'm not a camera operator. Is the same reason why a company, and I've had many like prospective clients be like, you know what, like, thank you for your time, but unfortunately, like, we don't want to move forward with you because like I'm too into it. And I think that's important to note for anybody here, because like I'll walk into an initial meeting with like a full mood board and like the idea that I have, which
Well, let's go into that example. So, like, say for example,
The car show.
Car show, yeah.
Yeah.
So someone, you don't shoot car shows. Someone says, "Hey, we really want you to shoot a car show." Like, on a practical level, what is your prep? What does that meeting look like? What are you telling this?
so
potential
again,
client?
in the same way, like, okay, I'm not a wedding photographer, right? But we use car shows as an example because it's a little bit more like realistic. So let's say like the Toronto whatever it's called, they're like, hey, we want you to come photograph for us. I could simply say no, that's not my style, but that's just idiotic because why couldn't it be? So I take that and I'm like, great. So you may have an idea of what you might want to photograph. However, give me a couple days. Let me come back to you with an idea. So I'll say like, okay, let's pick like, I don't know, 2 or 3 cars in there, Honda. And I'll create an entire narrative around the car that's being shown there that may not be even what they thought about. But because I've taken that extra step to be like, okay, what is it that I'm good at? I'm good at storytelling, I'm good at intimacy, I'm good at emotion. So how can I translate those things into like this perspective car show idea? And then I'll mood board the hell out of it and like deck it out. And that's when I walk into the meeting. I'm like, okay, guys, so, pleasure, whatever. This is my idea. So I now, instead of having a 0 chance, because I said no the first time, because I didn't want to do it, because it wasn't something that I wanted to do, I now have a 50-50 chance. And let's say they go with my idea. I'm still sticking true to like what it is that I do.